Hello and welcome back to Home Somewhere Else. We'll be continuing where we left off, which, if you recall, is after Chad finally got some answers about the powers and how they kind of sort of work. He doesn't have any answers as to how he got the powers, but an interesting thing that we saw is that he and Bruce share some of the same patterns, which apparently is a sign that you have powers. Like, I guess for Fred, it's that little thing that he has on his, like in the middle of his hair. And I don't recall what Malthus had. But yeah. Anyways, so aside from that, we got to see Malthus's powers. We got an explanation as to how Fred's powers sort of work. No explanation as to how Chad's powers work, but I'm assuming that'll come eventually. Anywho, so yeah. Well, I guess without further ado, let us continue Home Somewhere Else. Hints of sunlight dance across your face. Consciousness seeps in gradually, its approach hastened by a slight but firm knock on the door. As much as you don't want to wake up, you're not left with much of a choice as Fred, fully dressed and raring to go already, steps inside and begins to nag you. Somehow you manage to get him off your case with a yawn and a half-hearted promise that you'll be right down. Part of you was hoping that he'd just leave and let you get some more sleep, but a towel and a fresh set of clothes plop into your lap in a messy ball, tossed over by a winking German shepherd before he shuts the door again, shatters any chance of that. With a sigh, you force yourself out of bed, yawning once more and stretching your limbs as far as they will allow, then trudges off to the bathroom to finally start preparing for the day. Once you blearily step out of the bathroom, dressed and ready to go, you run face first into a very pissed-off Jenny, who wordlessly grabs you by the ear and drags you downstairs, her grip not loosening even a little, despite your protests. You unceremoniously are shoved into a chair next to Fred, in front of strawberry pancakes, this time thankfully untouched by Malthus's voracious appetite for the fruit. Jenny, satisfied with her work, nods confidently to herself before taking up her own spot at the table, that terrifying glare already completely gone. Instead, she begins gleefully recounting the tale of the monstrous slap that she delivered to Fred's ass earlier in the morning for leaving her hanging the other day, in excruciating detail. In fact, you're surprised that it didn't wake you up, based on how Jenny is describing the noise and how hollow and terrified Fred looks during her story. At least the pancakes are as delicious as you had expected them to be. Once you finish with breakfast, you and Fred head out towards the mountain. Much to your surprise, it only took a small amount of lying and gentle platitudes to prevent another meltdown from Jenny. In fact, she readily bought the lie that you were going to do more digging on Dusan in preparation for your next confrontation, and eagerly volunteered herself to do some digging of her own. As you and Fred both head off towards the park, Jenny bounces off eagerly into the other direction, with you both agreeing that this might actually work out in your favor. You make your journey to the foot of the mountain, relieved that you won't have to fight with her every day. Then, as the words every day pass through your head, you realize just how miserable this experience is going to be, getting up this early every day just to trudge up this mountain and no doubt get yelled at and beaten up by Bruce. The prospect doesn't sound very exciting, but you remind yourself that it's for Kathy and Thony. Your conviction for their sake supersedes the dread, at least. And hey, at least the long trek up to the lodge will be a good time to go over the lessons you'll learn with Fred, since the thoughts of asking too many questions around Bruce still unnerves you. Once you make it back to the lake clearing, you spot Malthus slowly meandering around the carnage and surveying it with a sad look in his eyes. The moment he notices you, though, his face lights up and he dashes over, scooping you both up into his strong arms and spinning you around in a rush of joy. He's probably relieved that he isn't alone with his thoughts and the damaged battlefield anymore. You briefly consider asking him why he was waiting out here at all if the damage upset him, but you figure out that the idea of spending just a few more moments with you and Fred is just that valuable to him. Your face heats up as that thought occurs to you, and you can't help but chuckle warmly as Mothic his cute and affectionate demeanor. Thankfully, neither of them seem to notice your blushing face, and once Mothic sets you both down, gives you both light pats on the head of course, he turns and proudly leads you both out to the lodge. You take a deep breath as you step through the heavy underbrush and into what basically amounts to Bruce's front yard. Actually, the entire forest probably counts as his front yard, now that you think of it. A nervous shiver dances up your spine now that you're back in front of that imposing wooden structure. Hopefully that stops eventually. So, Mothic. Mothic looks back at you and tilts his head. Did everything Bruce said yesterday make sense to you? Yes, it did. Nice. I was starting to get a little worried about that since, Mothic stops, turning to face you with an even more curious look on his face. Since there was a few words that I had to teach you, I was worried that some of it might have flown over your head. Wow, rude. What? How was that rude? All I'm saying is that Mothic. He's basically saying you're dumb, Mothic. No, Mothic keeps looking at you, both with a puzzled expression on his face. What is dumb? See, that's exactly what I mean. Basically, Mothic, when someone's dumb, it means that they aren't very smart or don't understand something. Which is what Chad is saying you are. Oh, I get it. So, I'm not dumb. Yes, Mothic, you're not dumb. Which, for the record, isn't what I'm saying at all. Fred. Stop putting words in my mouth. Oh, I'm putting something in your mouth, alright. You punch him on the shoulder. Ow. He acts like you just dealt a grievous, fatal wound to him, but its horrified glare crumbles into a wave of glee, giggles after only a few moments. You shake your head and let out a sigh, turning your attention back to Mothic. What I was actually trying to say is that it seems like you're a pretty damn fast learner, Mothic. Am I? Yes, you are. It's actually kind of impressive, so keep it up. Mothic beams with joy upon receiving your praise, then nods excitedly. Okay, I will. You nod in turn, but before you can say anything further, Bruce steps out of the lodge, only regarding your group briefly before turning his attention towards the training area and heading off in that direction. Looks like that's our cue, boys. Sure, let's go. After taking a deep breath and pushing down the strange mixture of anxiety and excitement stirring in your chest, you all head off after him. Once you get there, you see that Bruce has already taken up his place on the same bench as yesterday, his eyes listlessly dancing across the clearing and only landing on you once you step in front of him and plop down onto the grass once more. Morning. Good morning, Bruce. Morning. So, did you think about what we talked about yesterday? Any doubts? Yeah, we talked a bit more about it before going to bed last night. Good. And as for doubts, I don't really have any, but I also don't have all the information. Bruce nods somberly, leaning forward and taking a deep breath. Right. The monsters. Well, there's no point dancing around the truth. What you refer to as monsters weren't always like that. They were at one point normal people, just like you or me. Your breath hitches in your throat. Of course, that thought had occurred to you, especially after seeing the grove, but that didn't mean that you hadn't hoped that wasn't the case. Then, does that mean that every one of those trees in the grove is... Yes, they were all people who had transformed, and that I have subsequently put out of their misery. The grove is merely a tradition of mine, a way to honor those unfortunate people. How? What would have to happen to a person for them to change like that? To answer that, I will first need to confess to you that I left something out of our discussion yesterday. When I was explaining to you the detriments of mana exhaustion on the 3 aspects of your being, I said that the result of overuse of the soul is losing its ability to process mana, correct? Yeah. Well, that's not wrong. It's also not the whole truth. On very rare occasions, overuse of the soul can cause damage in another way. What exactly happens is far more complex for me to explain, and I'll admit that I don't fully understand it myself, but for the sake of our discussion, simply imagine that the soul develops a hole. Though it can still bring in mana, some of that raw, unfiltered mana will seep out into the rest of the system through that hole, and, as you would expect, the system isn't equipped to handle that. As more and more raw mana floods your system, it gets corrupted. As with everything else I've explained, the results of this can vary on a case-by-case basis, but they always share a common trait. Can you guess what that is? What they all have in common? Maybe all those strange bone-like protrusions and that glowy ghost-like hair and stuff? Yes, that is correct. Though, more specifically, the skull-shaped masks on their faces are the most consistent thing I've observed. As more and more raw mana floods the system, it overloads the 3 aspects, causing a person to change both physically and mentally. The longer the problem remains unchecked, the worse it becomes. Eventually you get what you call monsters. In later stages, the anatomical changes become more severe. For example, like how the tiger from the other day had massive arms but tiny legs. Sometimes it's worse than others. Take the hyena for example. Not only did it have bone growths, but its body was deteriorating and there were even poisonous sacs connected to its claws. Like you noticed though, it's not just physical alterations, the whole system is destabilized. The soul, for example, attempts to maintain a certain amount of mana within itself, but since that mana is consistently leaking out, the soul has to work on overdrive to keep up with it. Which, in turn, worsens the metaphorical hole in it, causing the soul to work even harder, and I think you get the picture. All that excess mana is what causes the ghostly protrusions, which usually exist to make up for the parts of the body that are lost as it corrupts. Hair, ears, things like that. The effects of the mind should be fairly obvious as well. Massive shifts in personality, like becoming more violent or gaining a voracious appetite. What a creature is at its core slowly crumples away until all that you're left with is a mindless, mana-starved beast, desperately searching for a way to keep up with its exponential growing hunger for mana. The process is gradual at least. At first, it's physically impossible to tell if someone's been tainted like that. The only real way to determine it early on is if there is a drastic personality change. He pauses, staring directly into your eyes, his tone carrying a degree of implication. You blink, waiting for him to continue before you realize his intent, and start to think. Then, wait, so that means that Dusan... Yeah, aside from being influenced and getting a Zoma, he's most likely tainted as well. Oh no. Kathy's told me that, ever since he got that big promotion several months ago, he's been acting way different. So the Dusan that we know is not the actual Dusan? More than likely no, he isn't. Then what do we do? There has to be a way to reverse it, right? Not definitively, no. What does that mean? Bruce takes another deep breath, leaning back in his seat once more. As far as I am aware, there is no definitive way to reverse the corruption unless it's caught right away. But I do have a theory on a way to potentially reverse it, as long as it's not too far along. How? What do we have to do? Even Fred seems intrigued now, since this discussion finally seems to have reached a point that even he hadn't heard before. I see that spark in your eye, Doberman, and I refuse to continue until you calm down. I won't say a further word until you accept that this is purely hypothetical and not a surefire solution. I do not need you getting your hopes up, then blaming me when it fails. I'm sorry. I'll try to temper my expectations. Good. Now my theory is this. The body and mind are able to heal and repair themselves, so long as you're provided with a good flow of healthy mana. So why should we expect the soul to be any different? And yet, despite that logic, should one of these holes form in a soul, the being is then doomed to transform into a monster. I believe that hole is not irreparable, it's just that the soul is incapable of repairing it, either because the unfiltered mana flowing through it is too powerful for the soul to mend it by itself, or it's too focused on keeping up with the mana lost to repair it. Either way, if we follow that train of thought, I think that you might be able to fix the soul by taking it over and repairing it yourself. In other words, if you drive someone, the lion for example, to the complete mana exhaustion, and then, in the very brief moments between the body running out of mana and the person dying, infuse them with a massive amount of healthy mana, it'll repair the hole and stop them from dying? Bruce closes his eyes and nods slowly. Despite his earlier warning, your heart is pounding in your chest with adrenaline. When he opens his eyes once again, that deathly serious look remains, and he scans over the three of you before him. Again, this is a theory, nothing more. Even if I am completely right, the chances of this working are very, very slim. If I am misunderstanding what the problem with the soul is, it won't work. If I am assuming the period of time between mana exhaustion and death is longer than it is, it won't work. If I am overestimating your abilities, it won't work. It has to. The three pairs of eyes drift over to you as you clench your fist. I'll make it work. I'm going to stop this on, and if there's even a slight chance of me being able to do it without depriving Thony of a dad, then I'm taking that chance. Chad. Bruce scans you for a moment before letting out a long, defeated sigh. And yet you still get your hopes up. Either way, that is what you will be training to accomplish, specifically to stand up to and outlast the line's massive reserves of chaotic raw mana. Bruce? I hate to burst both your and Chad's bubbles here, but I think that you're skipping an important part. None of us know how to infuse mana like that. I mean, I can do it through the body, but not directly into the soul. Chad barely understands his Zoma at all, no offense, and I don't think Malthic's powers would work either. Again, no offense. And since I'm assuming that you plan on sitting this fight out, even if you know how to, that won't do us any good either. I'm aware, Shepard. That's why the Doberman isn't the only one here to train. He stands up and walks over to your group, somehow seeming taller than he ever looked before. For your information, I do know how to do it, and you are going to learn how. It's not something that you can pick up in the afternoon. In fact, I doubt that you'll ever be able to master it with a year's worth of training, even considering how skilled you are already. But, as long as you have the ability to do it even a little, we'll still have a chance. Fred looks up at Bruce, himself now seeming smaller than ever before. With a nervous gulp and a nod, he finally speaks. Okay, I'll do my best. Oh, dear Shepard, it will take far more than your best to succeed in this endeavor. Jeez, menacing much? Either way, don't underestimate me. I think that I already have a vague idea of how to do it. Maybe. I figure it's still going to be exhausting as fuck, though. At first, yes. It will consume tremendous amounts of your own mana, but eventually you'll learn how to make better use of the ambient mana around you. Fred shifts his weight back and forth between his feet uncomfortably. You've never seen him look that angsty before. Hopefully Bruce doesn't push him so hard that he hurts himself. Seemingly satisfied with Fred's reaction though, Bruce nods and steps back, his gaze drifting over to you. Alright. Are there any other questions? No. Not for now, no. I am eager to get started though. I am curious to see what my Zoma is really capable of, and I figure that you're probably my best bet to learn that. I hope that enthusiasm is more than just hollow words. I am not going to go easy on you. Take it from me, Chad. I really do hope that you're prepared, both physically and mentally. I'm ready. I'll do whatever it takes to be able to defend the people that I care about. Whether I like it or not, I'm in way too deep with all of this mess to turn back now. Remaining ignorant to it all is going to bite me in the ass later. So, while I have this chance, I'm going to take it, even if Dusan didn't show up. I still need to figure out what happened to me over the last decade, and I have a fairly solid hunch that all of this craziness has something to do with that. Whatever you have in store for me, bring it on. I see. Let's hope that you don't come to regret those words, Doberman. All of this goes for you as well, Mothic, so I hope that you are ready. Mothic nods confidently and firmly flexes his arms, seemingly quite confident about the upcoming trials. Definitely more than you and Fred, that's for sure. Good. Let's not waste any time then. Stand up. The three of you nod in turn and get to your feet. First of all, the basics. As you all know, each Zoma is unique in its own way, so there's no catch-all method to training and improving it. It all depends on what you're capable of and how you want to improve. Therefore, before we proceed, I'd like for you to all demonstrate to me what you are already able to do. As for the Shepherd and Mothic, I am already familiar with your abilities, so you both can stand by for now. Doberman, show me what you can do. Sure. You take a deep breath, then thrust your fist forward, summoning your magical hand, your Zoma. You begin to demonstrate how the hand mimics your motions perfectly, following your arms as you move and twist it. Bruce pays close attention to your motions, watching it with a surprising amount of curiosity. Next, you show off your ability to extend and retract it, glancing over at Mothic as you do so and seeing a sparkle in his eyes as he watches you like a proud parent. That's about all you can show off without any props, though, so after looking around, you point over at your shoulder at the makeshift training dummies nearby. Is it okay if I use those? Yes, that is why they are there. Go ahead. Alright, thanks. You walk over to the closest one, grabbing onto it with your Zoma before leaning back far enough to demonstrate that you are able to hold yourself up with it, even from afar. You pull yourself back up by retracting your Zoma, then close the distance to the dummy before standing several feet away. Lastly, you throw a quick punch, nailing the dummy square in the middle of its face and causing it to flop backwards momentarily before flicking back up. Satisfied that you've exhausted your minimal list of abilities, you give your hand a shake, dismissing your Zoma before turning back to Bruce, only to see him staring at you with a raised eyebrow. Well, ta-da, I guess. He looks so disappointed. Letting out a long sigh, he crosses his arms before bringing up a hand to his forehead and gently rubbing it. Well, you are only now learning about your Zoma. It's expected that you wouldn't know how to do very much with it. So you can create and dismiss an ethereal copy of your hand at will. As expected, your Zoma is purely based on the body. Come back over here and summon it again for me. Sure. You walk back to him, throwing a punch off to the side before you approach the tiger to not accidentally hit him with your ghost hand, before finally holding it carefully in front of him once you come to a stop. Bruce takes a close look at it, analyzing it intensely for a few moments before grabbing it with his own hand and squeezing it tightly. Do you feel this? Kinda. It's like a vague sensation. He nods to himself, then releases it and takes a step back. Hold it firmly. Before you even have a chance to react, Bruce's leg is high above the ground, and the air around you charges with static that tingles your fur. Then the echoes of a loud clap of thunder roar throughout the surrounding trees. Whoa. You shield your eyes from the blinding flash of light, terrified that you're about to be in a tremendous amount of pain. And yet, nothing. When you look back up at the tiger, you can barely manage to see your Zoma split nearly down the middle, just before it completely fades away into nothingness. What the hell was that? Ignoring you, he lowers his foot back to the ground, then gives it a shake before letting it come to a rest, causing small sparks and arcs of blue electricity to dance away from his leg, almost as if he shook them out of his fur. Did you feel that? I felt it, but it didn't really hurt, thankfully. Was going that hard really necessary, though? He continues to ignore you, crossing his arms once again and bringing a hand up to his chin. Alright, so it is directly attached to you, and your motions can be controlled through it, but damage to it doesn't affect you, at least not beyond wasting the mana it took to summon it in the first place. Jeez, I know I said that I'd trust you, but come on. Depending on how you see it, it's probably a good thing that you can't feel pain through it, though that might be indicative of a lack of synergy. It's possible that the fact will change with training. I also noticed that you always use a specific gesture to summon it in every time. Is that necessary, or do you just do that out of familiarity? I honestly don't know. I mean, the first time that it appeared, I just lunged to grab onto something that was falling far away from me, and there it was. That's how I've always summoned it ever since. Now that I have a good idea of what you're currently capable of, we're going to start by having you master those skills first, before you try adding any new capabilities to it. So let me summarize what I believe you are currently able to do, and what your limits are, so we're all on the same page. Then we can work on breaking those limits. Sure. Fred and Mothak are still patiently waiting off to the side though. Their attention is focused on you and Bruce, seemingly just as curious as you are about where this is going. Since your Zoma is based on the body, your hand is simply a projection of your real hand made out of mana, and that is still indirectly linked to your physical form. Naturally, each time you summon it, it consumes mana from within your body, and whenever you dismiss it, that mana just vanishes. Although it is fairly small and you can't do very much with it, so that mana cost is very likely very low, but it's also possible that there is an initial cost to summoning it, followed by a continuous drain as you maintain it. We need to figure out whether that's the case. Additionally, we'll also need to figure out other ways to summon it, not just by throwing a punch. Alongside, we'll build up its resilience so that it's not so easy to shatter. If a simple kick was enough to break it, then you run the risk of an enemy taking advantage of its fragility and effectively disabling your ability to fight. A simple kick? You call down the might of frickin' Thor on it! Well, maybe it's just innately extra. That's a worrying thought. Lastly, I think that we should work on distance, both in terms of summoning it and sending it further away, and drawing it in close enough that it can line up with your real hand, so that it can potentially act as a sort of gauntlet. Ooh, that would be cool. Keep in mind that this is all what your Zoma can do at its most basic level, like with how the shepherds went from being barely able to grow a sprout to raising an entire forest. You have plenty of room to grow and improve. Heh, I'm awesome, ain't I, Mothak? Mothak nods and applauds happily. Just don't make me do that again. I could barely get out of bed for like a week afterwards. Distractions aside, that is what you're going to be working on. For now, focus solely on improving those things and don't worry about anything else. We'll think about implementing them in combat at a later time. Sounds like a lot of work. Getting cold feet already? No, just... that's a lot to think about, even without thinking about using them in combat. Don't worry, Chad, it takes time. It's not like I reached the level that I am at after like 2 years, and then stayed at the same ever since. It's going to take a long time to get it all down. And a lot of effort, too. Anyways, before we begin in earnest, do you have any last questions, Doberman? No, not at all, just... thank you again. Then let's begin. Mothak, Shepherd, once I've gotten the Doberman started on training, I will return to get the both of you started as well. Mothak nods enthusiastically and Fred gives a thumbs up and a smirk. Bruce merely rolls his eyes before walking to your opposite direction, leading you over to your own spot some distance away. Alright, pay attention, as I am only going to go over your regimen once. Don't make me regret taking this time to train you. Oh boy, there goes Bruce being Bruce. You let out a short sigh before nodding firmly. I'm ready. To begin, we are going to first measure your Zoma's cost. Bring it out. You nod and throw a punch, summoning your hand. As you do, Bruce pulls a small device out of his pocket. Okay, now what? Bruce presses a button on it, and you realize that you recognize the shape from PE back in school. Must be a stopwatch. Now, just keep it out. That's it? That's it. I'm going to test to see how long that you can last with it summoned. I'll come back to check out on you later. Feel free to take a seat or wander around, but don't go too far. Most importantly, though, do not dismiss it. If you dismiss it by accident, we'll have to start over. That's it? He rolls his eyes, pocketing the timer once again, as he turns away towards Fred and Malthus. I'll be back tonight. Tonight? He pauses, staring back at you over his shoulder with a dismissive huff. That is, if you can last that long. He continues walking away, leaving you by your lonesome. You let out a sigh and flop down onto the grass, making sure to hold your hand up so that it doesn't accidentally punch the ground or something. Jeez. This is totally gonna suck. And so your training to better understand your Zoma begins. Not exactly a flashy start. By the end of the first day, you find yourself somewhat jealous of the looks of exhaustion painted across the faces of the other three men. Despite his exhaustion, Fred still rushes over to you once Bruce lets him go to check on you and make sure that you're not dying or something. Before he finishes his checkup, Bruce confirms that your Zoma does seem to have a summon cost only, which actually ticks you off a bit. You could have figured that out by yourself, and came to that conclusion hours ago, but you thought that maybe you were lucky and just had a massive amount of reserve mana. No such luck. Instead, you had to watch other people train, bored out of your mind, your magic hand rapidly growing mundane as it hovered in front of you, almost tauntingly. They were so far away that you couldn't really talk to them, and hell, you didn't even get anything to eat. Probably could have asked, but whenever you'd consider it, you would worry that the lapse in your focus would dismiss your hand, and you figured that out of all the absolute bottom of the barrel choices presented to you today, starting all over was the worst of it. Though frankly, you probably could have been fine. You fought with it before, so why would just getting up cause a problem? But better safe than sorry, right? Nah, you're just overthinking it. Afterwards, Bruce gives Malthus permission to guide you guys down the mountain since it was getting late, and thankfully, no more monsters attack, and you part ways before saying your goodbyes, with Malthus heading back up the mountain and you guys heading back to the cafe. Jenny, the absolute saint that she was sometimes, had gotten some food for you, which you both eagerly devour before heading upstairs to get some well-deserved rest. Day 2 of training. Your morning routine today is much the same as yesterday, though this time it's Fred who is difficult to rouse from slumber. The preview of your state that you no doubt would perpetually also be in soon enough doesn't seem very exciting, to say the least. Malthus meets you only a short distance into the forest as well, which is a welcome surprise. After greeting him, you all climb the mountain together. Once you make it back to the training grounds, you find Bruce already there waiting for you, seemingly meditating before your arrival. Wordlessly, you all split up to your designated areas and Bruce gets to his feet to follow you to yours. Alright, today we're going to test your limits. Summon it. You follow his command, summoning your Zoma with a punch and holding it out in front of him. Now dismiss it. Okay. You do as he says and dismiss your hand. Alright, now just keep doing that until you start to feel fatigued. Wait, what? You heard me. The fatigue will be a sign that you're running out of mana, which means it's time to stop. I'll be close by and paying attention, since I need to count how many times you can do it, so don't worry about hurting yourself or anything like that. Without much room to argue, you set to summoning and dismissing your Zoma. For a good while, you follow Bruce's instructions to the letter. You throw a punch and your polygonal hand made of mana appears, then you dismiss it. Again, and again, and again. Eventually, after the 13th repetition or so, you encounter an unforeseen issue. Your arm is cramping like mad, forcing you to wince as you keep repeating the motion. Bruce notices this and tells you to try with your other arm and cycle back and forth as you start to cramp up. After a while, you've completely lost count and your arms are starting to feel like they're made of lead. After dismissing your hand once again, before you can throw another punch, you almost keel over involuntarily, supporting yourself on your knees as you pant, sweat pouring from your face. Is this what mana exhaustion feels like? God, it's miserable. I feel like I can't even move. 632 times. Not bad. Your ears twitch as Bruce speaks, and you manage to summon up your energy to turn your head towards him, watching him approach. He goes on to explain that, while that might seem like a lot, it's only because you're using your Zoma at its most basic level, meaning its cost is exponentially low. Eventually, as you develop your Zoma and it gains more abilities, its mana cost will increase in tandem. At least, you'll never have to do that tedious crap again. Day 3 of training. Today, you are going to keep doing what you did yesterday. What? Why? This time we're going to break your limit a bit, and in order to do that, you need to push past the fatigue. So go on and exhaust yourself again. Let me know once you start to feel it, and I'll work with you on the next step. Can I at least get something to eat in between? No. Why not? Because. Without another word, he turns and heads back towards Mothik and Fred, who you notice look like night and day from here. Mothik is excited and beaming, whereas Fred looks like he's about to be stabbed to death in a back alley. Can I at least know why? Bruce stops briefly to respond to you. No. Then he continues on. Damn it. You take a moment to stretch and limber your arms, hopefully to stave off some of the soreness in advance. Then get to work. By the time the sun starts to set, you can feel that now familiar awful feeling setting in again. But Bruce... The big tiger's ears twitch, and he turns away from Fred in your direction. He nods and turns back to Fred momentarily, saying something inaudible to him before making his way over towards you. You're already feeling it, Doberman? Yeah, my arms are numb, and I feel a little nauseous. Good. What do you mean, good? Keep at it a little longer while I'm here. But I'm... Just do it, Doberman. You take a deep breath, wipe sweat away from your forehead as you force your body back into position, then resume the summoning and dismissing process as best as you can, all while Bruce trains a steady eye on you. Shepard? You jump a bit from Bruce's sudden shout, but then you keep going, worried that if you stop, you won't be able to start again. Though you did notice Fred slowly reacting to the call, then hobbling over to you, his exhaustion easily visible in everything from his expression to his gait. You're still not entirely sure what Bruce is even doing with him. He refuses to tell you anything either, though it's blatantly apparent it's exhausting him, so you don't want to pry too much. And today is no different. He looks like a walking corpse, but you barely notice. Though being Fred, he still manages to flash you a tired smile as he lines up next to Bruce. Alright, Shepard, it's time for you to put everything that I've taught you into practice. You can barely even register him speaking with how tired you are. Every fiber of your being is heavy with aches. It's even worse than how you felt after the test that you had to do back in PE. Doberman, stop for a second. You can't even question him. You immediately cease all movements as he commands you, followed quickly by you collapsing backwards into the grass, your lungs heaving as they desperately suck in air. Fred carefully kneels down next to you, leaning over to you a bit and holding his hand out. Alrighty, Here goes. Wait, what? What are you gonna do? Don't worry about it. Just, don't freak out after I'm done, okay? Alright, Shepard. Remember to take your time and breathe. You peer up at both of the men through a single strained eye, the curiosity and confusion registering enough with Bruce for him to finally give you some answers. Doberman, since you are working on expending your mana reserves and the Shepherd is learning how to better manipulate mana, we're going to be working together every now and then. The Shepherd is going to attempt to share his mana with you, which will simultaneously help him get better at it and help you continue training even once you run out. Though, even when mastered, it's still an immensely draining and imperfect process, so do not be alarmed by the Shepherd's resulting exhaustion. I won't let either of you hurt yourselves by overexerting your mana reserves. Fred nods, and while still wearing that tired smile, holds his hands over his chest with a very small amount of distance in between. He closes his eyes and takes a deep breath, and his whole body tightens, causing dimly glowing light to form beneath his palms. It looks similar to what he healed your foot the other day, but much denser and more noticeable. It's warm and tingles your chest where it rests. You involuntarily shudder from the sensation. Whoa. Fred winces a bit, his muscles tighten further, and the sensation deepens. It begins to seep more noticeably into your very being, coursing through your body. After only a few seconds, your breathing begins to slow, and feeling returns to your arms. You watch on in amazement and enthralled by this feeling, but suddenly the glowing vanishes, and before you even have a chance to react, Fred flops forward onto you, completely limp. For Fred! You sit up quickly, barely even acknowledging how impossible such a simple task should have been in your previous state. Then you support your unconscious friend and stare down at him with a deep worry. Don't worry, Doberman. That is normal and expected. Like I said a moment ago, the process is imperfect, especially when you're unfamiliar with the technique. The ratio of mana consumed to impart is wildly unoptimized, so it consumes a massive amount. Though I am quite shocked by the process he's making. You may just have a chance after all. In any case, he will likely be out for a while. Which is why, as both a practice for Mothic and a show of trust in his independence, I am going to allow him to help you both get home, since he seems to already know where you live. So, will be all right? Yes, I made sure that he ate properly beforehand. He may be unconscious, but there will be no lasting damage. Bruce uses his whiskers to lift Fred up by his shirt, his body distressingly limp like a puppet. You do your best to trust Bruce's words that he'll be fine and get back to your feet as well. Now that you've gotten a second wind, I'd like for you to continue. Under normal circumstances, you will fall unconscious before using a deadly amount of mana, like the Shepherd did so. So we're going to have to do that as well. And don't worry, there's no real risk to pushing yourself like this. This is a mana-rich environment, and so long as you exhaust yourself here, your body will be able to regulate the mana in you without a problem. So keep going until you are close to fatigue again. You nod with a small sigh. As you look back up, you see Mothic trudging over with an angry spark in his eyes. He snatches Fred from Bruce's whiskers, then cradles him with a far more comfortable and less disturbing way. Annoyed by Bruce's lack of tact or respect while grabbing Fred, Mothic uses his free hand to bat the whisker away while glaring at them. They move back a bit, seeming to watch Mothic for a moment before fully retracting backwards to Bruce. I was about to hand him over to you anyway, Mothic. Mothic gently and carefully pats Fred on the back while glaring at Bruce. With no words exchanged, at least as far as you can tell, the moth simply turns and walks away from Bruce in a huff, with his arms crossed. Bruce shakes his head slowly before returning his attention to you. Alright, you begin, Doberman. Man, this sucks. I knew that it was going to be hard, but now I have to literally knock myself unconscious? I suppose that I should at least be grateful for this body. If I had still been skinny, I feel like I would have turned to jello by now. It'll be worth it in the end, Chad. Days pass as you repeat the process over and over again. You wear yourself out. Fred knocks himself out, giving you mana, and then you knock yourself out again. As grim as that sounds, though, you feel like you're actually coming to more thoroughly understand what your limits are. Mothok seems to have the easiest time of it, with his training seemingly being only to carry you and Fred back home at the end of each day, though he does have to make all three of you invisible on the way back, so you suppose that still counts. On the 5th day, you, Fred, and Jenny were able to go see Thony again thanks to Mr. Lorenzo's generosity. While there, Thony reports that he passed everything that you had said on to Kathy and promised on her behalf that you would hold on for a few more days, and that they trust that whatever you're doing will be worth it. That being said, Kathy can only wait for so long. She can't risk keeping Thony around Dusan in the state that he is, which you don't blame her for at all. But at the same time, would running away even accomplish anything? There's no doubt that Dusan would just follow them away, and that would just make the situation worse for everyone. It's a tough decision to make, but ultimately you ask Thony to tell Kathy to hang in there, and that you're going to keep them safe, no matter what. As Thony's innocent request too, you make a promise, and after a hug, he scampers off to class, leaving you filled with determination to keep going. 7th day of training. After the last several days, I hope that you now have a good grasp of your Zoma cost, and how much of that cost you can tolerate. Am I correct? Yeah, I think that I got a pretty good idea of it. Good. It may seem simple, but being able to tell how much the use of your Zoma affects you is one of the most fundamental parts of using one. That's my goal here, to provide you with the basic foundation for you to build upon on your own time when you're training by yourself. Got it. Since you've got a good grasp on the cost and your limits, you're finally going to move on to actually improving it, which is why I've invited Mothok to join us. It has come to my attention that he was the one who actually helped you figure out how to extend and retract your hand. Is that true? Yeah, actually. I'm still kind of reeling from it. It's not every day that a big moth guy randomly starts fiddling with your powers out of nowhere. Especially considering that I've only ever really seen bug people on TV and stuff before. How exactly did you do all of that stuff with your Zoma anyway, Mothok? If I had to guess, it's because his mind-based Zoma allows him to be more intimately aware of mana fluctuations. People with Zomas are easy to spot if you can sense mana, since they have a lot more of it. Also, thanks to his Zoma in particular, he's quite good at picking up on and understanding a creature's innermost feelings and emotions, which likely explains why he warmed up to you so fast and was so eager to help. Oh yeah, that's exactly it! I could tell that there was a lot of mana flowing through your arm, and all it took was a little bit of poking to make your Zoma pop out. After that, I just sort of guessed that you could extend and retract it, and that it'd be useful at the moment. I'm glad that I was right. Yeah, same here. I'm also pretty glad that you and I can talk so clearly now. Feels like just yesterday that I could only hear a word or two. His face flushes red and he pushes his fingers together. Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable around you now. You grin wide, giving him a firm, encouraging pat on the shoulder. Same here, buddy. Happy to have you along on this crazy ride. Mothok's blush deepens and he covers his face completely with all of his hands. The tiger reaches over and gives the moth a gentle pat on the head with his whisker. You are quite the fast learner, aren't you? Mothok only answers with a shy, embarrassed whine, causing you to laugh some more before the tiger clears his throat to draw your attention back to him. Anyway, to get back on topic. That is precisely what I'm going to have the both of you do. Mothok will learn how to better sense and process mana, while helping you learn how to extend and retract your hand with your mind. Now, I know the first time that you tried this, it didn't go well, but you didn't have much time, and beyond that, I've also given some tips that should help you out as well. I'm sure that it'll go better this time. Mothok, finally recovering from his shyness, applauds with his upper hands and jumps a little bit in excitement, clearly eager to work with you. His enthusiasm remains dangerously infectious. Cool. I'm looking forward to it, Mothok. Alright, let's get to it then. Mothik nods, stepping closer to you and holding up a finger. I'm pretty sure a major hurdle that first time was the communication barrier. We just met, so I couldn't really talk to you at all. But things will be different now. I envy that optimism, but I still feel like it's going to take some time for me to... I understand how you feel, don't worry. But just like how I learned to talk with signs, and then gradually like this, it'll just take time and practice. And I'm not the only one who learns fast, since we don't need to use signs anymore at all. Oh, that's fair. Though I admit that I actually had a lot of fun communicating with signs and stuff. Haha, me too. But progress is progress, so let's start making some. He glances over at Bruce briefly after saying that, and you can't help but follow his gaze. The tiger's mouth is open, as if interrupted right as he was about to speak. The interruption seemed to have satisfied him though, and his expression relaxes a bit. To begin, can you please summon your Zoma? You immediately comply and throw a punch in the air, summoning it as requested. Good. Now, as you probably figured out by now, your Zoma is an extension of your own body, so it should follow the commands your brain gives your body, instead of you needing to use your body to control it. Basically, the same way you move your arms, legs, muscles, whatever, should naturally also work with your Zoma. Make sense? I think so, yeah. Good. So in order to do that, we just need to figure out a way for you to get your brain to perceive it as part of you, just like it does your real hand. Luckily for you, I've been told of a method to trick your mind into thinking that something that isn't a part of you is. It's something called multisensory perception and integration, which is basically a fancy way of saying that we need to manipulate certain stimuli to make it so that your brain processes those stimuli enacted on your Zoma the same way that it would a direct touch. Multisensory what? Who taught you that, Mothik? Books! Mr. Bruce taught me how to read. Oh, neat. But why does he have books that teach that kind of stuff just lying around? What a weird guy. Anyway, the ideal outcome is that we trick your brain into registering your Zoma as part of you, and then reverse the process so that you can apply stimulation to it with your mind. In this case, you would extend and retract it without actually moving your arm. It'll by no means be an easy task, but it is definitely possible. Most every Zoma user needs to go through training similar to this to enhance their affinity with their own power. In this particular case, we can almost consider this training more common than most, since people live their whole lives familiar with their whole body. If they lose a part of it, they'll need to adjust to that change. This is roughly the same thing, though in reverse. Instead, you'll be adding a limb to your body, but the same thought process still applies. Yep, so are you ready to get started? Yep, I trust you, Mothik, so let's do it. Somehow, this round of training ended up being the worst so far, solely because of how draining it was. Not physically, but mentally. It only took a few hours of the first day for your head to start throbbing from how hard you had to concentrate on the task at hand. Initially, all you did were some simple mind games with a fake hand to familiarize you with the concept. After tickling both your real hand and the fake one Mothik had conjured up with his Zoma, the moth would smash the fake one with all his might, and for a split second you would feel the pain in the real one. The brain is scary sometimes. After experimenting with that subject for a while, the next step for you was to put your Zoma in close enough that it covered your hand, which was a challenge in and of itself, surprisingly. Thankfully, you did eventually get it, though the process and resulting sensation felt akin to forcing your hand into a glove that was 2 sizes too small, even if, visually, your hand could comfortably fit inside. And so, for that moment, your objective was to keep your Zoma like that for as long as possible without interruption, the intent being to acclimate yourself to your Zoma being a part of your everyday life, a direct part of your true physical form. Of course, such a task would pose a serious problem if anybody, especially Jenny, saw your hand suddenly polygonal and glowing all the time. Thankfully, Bruce and Mothik devised a solution for that. A blue fingerless glove perfectly fitted to your right hand. Actually, it was originally more of a mitt, but once you slipped it over your Zoma, it shrunk down, taking the visage of the glowing polygonal hand with it until only the fingerless glove remained. Apparently infused with some of Mothik's mana, it would act as a weak illusionary barrier around your hand, so any outside observers would only see the fingerless glove, though if you squinted and focused on it for a bit, you could still tell that it's a mitten. It came as a surprise, seeing as how you thought Mothic needed to be present for his Zoma to work. It really put into perspective how capable the big guy was, and how powerful his Zoma could be, even in what you assumed to be its infancy, like yours was. Though Bruce did explain that Mothic's training so far had been almost entirely to improve his ability to support you and Fred with your training, since it was strictly forbidden by Bruce to get involved with a fight. Not that the idea seemed to bother him anyway. In fact, he seemed quite excited to be able to help in whatever way he can. The tiger passed this information on to you with a touch of resentment in his tone, which you later figured out was because it wasn't his idea to begin with. He wanted Mothic to train on more important things, but Mothic had already made up his mind that he was going to help you guys out one way or another. After a bit of prodding and insistence, Bruce eventually shared that you were the first friends Mothic had ever had besides Bruce, so that's why Mothic wanted to help. That and the fact that the Moth wanted to show you gratitude for all the help that you and Fred had provided so far. That's all that you were able to get out of him, which was honestly a chore by itself. But almost tauntingly, he assured you that there was far more to it than that, and then resumed your training without another word. Now, a seemingly infinite tidal wave of questions still swarms through your mind about the two mysterious mountain dwellers, with each vague half-answer you get only raising even more questions. But you're gradually coming to terms with the fact that asking them is a waste of time, at least for now. Eventually the answers will come, you just need to give it time. The days come and go, and all the while your Zoma encases your hand in the shower, during meals, while you sleep, while you're climbing the mountain to train, during your training, and on your way back down. Always on. It's become a routine. Wake up, breakfast, climb the mountain, train, go back down, get thrown into the lake by Fred to wash off Mothic's sand, dinner, sleep, all with your Zoma active. You are decidedly grateful that it doesn't have to a continuous cost. The very thought of how exhausting that would be exhausts you. But you remain diligent. Some days you come close to losing it, waking up to it fading away, but a quick punch always rectifies that before it fully disappears. After a few days, Bruce lightens up on Fred, since the culminative strain was noticeably starting to get to the poor shepherd. Fred had complained at first, but ultimately agreed to it. On the plus side, it means that he can help you down the mountain each day himself instead of having Mothic do it. Sure, the big moth was disappointed and had insisted that it was fine, but you still feel guilty for relegating him to being a pack mule so often. Plus, it's nice to finally get to see those dark circles under Fred's eyes start to fade away. And so the cycle continued until one exhausting night where even Bruce was too drained to put up a fight when Mothic asked him if he could go down the mountain with you and spend the night. The tiger had even agreed to let you show up late the next day. You would have celebrated more if you weren't so tired. In your collective defense, all you had earned a break. Even Mothic, a seemingly boundless source of enthusiasm and energy, was showing his fatigue. The rest of that night was a blur. You know for a fact, however, that you eventually made it to the bed, and you must have passed out quickly. In the middle of the night, you blearily woke up and found yourself staring at your bare right hand. You stare at it with half-lidded, blurry eyes. You have barely enough conscious thought to realize that something is wrong here, but not what specifically. Deciding to deal with it the following morning, you absent-mindedly roll your fingers and, as your eyes close up again, a dim blue light enshrouds that hand once more. You nestle up against Fred, getting comfortable again, and let yourself begin to drift back off to sleep. Your eyes snap wide open, adrenaline suddenly furiously pumping through your body and making you feel more awake than you felt in days. You stare at your right hand as if it's some alien monster, briefly wondering if that was a dream. So you dismiss your Zoma, staring intently at your hand as the glow fades, and then, like flipping a switch in your head, it comes right back. You rocket upwards in bed, still staring down at your hand with a sparkle in your eye. You did it. You actually did it. After all this time keeping your Zoma on for hours and hours and hours non-stop, you finally called on it without needing to move your arm at all, much less throw a punch. Mothic, who had managed to somehow squeeze in behind Fred, peers over at the shepherd's shoulders to watch you for a moment as you flicker your Zoma on and off, your hand with utter childlike glee before softly applauding your accomplishment. Then he promptly passes right back out. Now that you think about it, how in the hell did you Fred and the muscular moth like him managed to fit on such a small mattress anyway? Carefully, clearly. You were all squished super close together, and even then Modok was hanging halfway off the side. That morning, after subtly banishing Modok before he could devour the entire breakfast by telling him to wait for you at the edge of the forest, you meet up with Jenny downstairs. You still have no idea how she has so much money to keep buying you that delicious food every day for breakfast, what with her cafe being not even open yet, but you certainly aren't going to complain. So, big news today, boys. You and Jenny both glare at him, and he awkwardly swallows his mouthful of egg before continuing. Did Dusan stumble over his own feet this morning on the way to school? He chuckles to himself while Jenny stares daggers at him. In his defense, though, that very well could be the news Jenny has to deliver. In between continuing to prepare the cafe on her own, Jenny had been tailing Dusan and reporting back on his activities every morning. So far, you've learned that Dusan follows a fairly strict schedule with no real diversions. Drop Thony off at school, go to work at the city hall, pick Thony up from school, go home, repeat. Sure, sometimes he might go somewhere different while he's at work, but it wasn't ever anywhere important. At least as far as Jenny could tell, since she couldn't ever follow him too closely. Some quote-unquote sketchy dude was always following him around and made tailing him hard. Probably just a bodyguard, you wager, but Jenny insists he's way too sketchy just to be a bodyguard. In fact, most of her news was just her overblowing the importance of menial things. Dusan dropped his wallet today, Thony sneezed, and Dusan didn't say bless you. They have a sale on gummy bears at the candy store. But today, she looks way more intense as she clears her throat to shut Fred up. No, jackass. It's clearly something big this time. I don't know if you noticed, but it's super freaking early, so I shouldn't ever have news about Dusan yet. But while I was out getting breakfast, I spotted him and Thony rushing to school. It was barely even open before he dropped the kid off. You both blink, then glance up at the clock. 8:17. Holy crap, that is early. We should go see him. Jenny follows you outside, struggling for a moment to lock up behind you. When she's done, she marches off towards the school, but she stops after a few steps when she realizes that you're not following her. She turns around and stares at you expectantly, like a puppy waiting for a treat. Oh, are you coming too then? Yeah, I always love to go to school sometimes, you know, to nag Mr. Lorenzo about stuff or help him with paperwork. Fred stares Jenny wide, innocent smile down with a glare of disappointment. Seriously? Who are you even trying to fool? Jenny scoffs, the smile fading from her face immediately into a tight frown as she glares at Fred. Well, Chad was eating it up. Thanks for blowing it for me, Fred. Wait, what? Today's burger day in the cafeteria. Jenny for some reason sees it as an all-you-can-eat burger buffet, since she's an alumni and also knows the lunch lady. For your information, they are the ones always inviting me to the kitchen so that I can spill all the juicy tea for them. They crave the tea, Chad. They yearn for the tea. Okay. Since when did they have a burger day? We didn't have anything like that back when we were in school. Oh yeah, it's something that Mr. Lorenzo came up with recently to help raise students' morale. Damn, no fair. I might have actually enjoyed going to school if we had burger days. Yeah, you would have loved Mr. Lorenzo as a principal. Yeah. Anyways, let's get going, shall we? Sure. The three of you head towards the school, watching the now familiar sight of Marimambo coming to life around you as it wakes up, with stores flipping their signs to open and lights flickering on. After a short walk, you guys make it to the school's entrance, where Mr. Lorenzo, as always, is greeting parents and students alike. Just beside him, Thony is sitting sullenly on the bench, idly fiddling with a strap on his backpack. As you approach, his forlorn gaze slowly drifts up to you, and immediately he bursts with energy, leaping up to his feet. Mr. Chad! Mr. Fred! Ma'am! Hey, Thony. Sup, little buddy? How's everything going? Fred kneels down next to Thony, leaning in nice and close with a sly grin on his face, as if sharing some deeply important secret. He whispers into Thony's ear. We're making big progress. Operation Cat Rescue is almost a go. Do you think that you and your mom can hang in there for a little bit longer, Agent Thony? Despite his situation, the little kitten's eyes beam at Fred's playful framing of it all, and he nods eagerly. As long as it takes, Mr. Agent Fred. Fred gets up again, flashing him a smile before patting his head. Good to hear, Agent. Very, very good. But that's not all that we're here for. Madam Rabbit is also on a mission to eat all of the cafeteria's burgers. Frederick? Fred's big grin fades immediately, a cold sweat forming on his brow as Jenny's murderous glare drills into the back of his head. Thony thankfully doesn't seem to notice, instead looking up at Jenny with a big grin. Really, ma'am? Because that would be awesome. I could get you some extra burgers if you want them. Really? Yeah, I always help out around the cafeteria with a friend of mine, and they always give me a bunch of extra food that they usually just throw away. Oh my god, I love this kid. I would have to cook for like a week. Do you even cook at all, bro? Frederick? That's actually really sweet of you, Thony. I'm proud of you for taking charge. Heh, same here. Chad and I used to do the same when we were in school. Good to know that their old traditions haven't changed. Well, now that I actually feel kind of bad about mooching off of your hard work, kiddo, are you sure that you'll be willing to share? Yes, ma'am. Mr. Lorenzo told me that you were poor, sad, and a lonely lady. That's why you always have to come to school to beg for some food to be able to live. I couldn't stand the thought of Mr. Chad and Mr. Fred, being in a situation like that, so that I'd be happy to help out whatever way I can. Besides, they always give me so much anyway. I couldn't ever hope to eat it all by myself. It's a win-win. Oh. Mr. Lorenzo said that? The smile on her face is terrifying. The grin of a scorned woman. The glare of fury that can make the fires of hell look like a sunny day at the beach. You don't dare say anything now. Yeah, he also gave me permission to tell the lunch ladies about your situation, so that they're aware and willing to help. Oh my, Mr. Lorenzo is such a good guy, isn't he? Her tone is flat, her eyes quivering and murderous. Drift over to the line, who is jovially laughing with a parent. You wonder if Bruce has enough room for another body in his grove. Totally, so don't worry, ma'am. I've got you covered. Jenny looks down at Thony with a last ounce of tenderness in her being. Then that gaze slowly drifts to Fred, her smile now absent of anything but hate. You look at Fred, and Fred looks back at you, more terrified than he was when staring down the maw of death at the mountain. He nervously smiles. Hey, Thony. The tiny voice breaks through the oppressive tension from behind you, cutting into that disturbing silence. Before you can turn around, a small kid trots carefully up to Thony, smiles and awkwardly waving. He's a small white Samoyed, a little shy-looking with a defensive posture. His eyes peer out from a black stripe across his face, similar to a raccoon's mask. He must be a mixed breed as well. Thony eagerly hugs him, pinning his arms to the side as he lifts him up and spins him around. Hey, Roro! They only spin for a brief moment before Thony loses his balance and the pair topples over, though thankfully they land on Roro's backpack, cushioning the fall. After a moment, they start giggling, then stand back up. Whoops, sorry about that. Mr. Chad, Mr. Fred, ma'am, this is my friend, Roro, the one I was telling you about. Oh, hey, nice to meet you, Roro. Hey, dude. Sup, Roro? Long time no see. Roro flinches, his face flushing a bit as he looks to the ground, grabbing his own arm awkwardly and responding in a quiet, clearly anxious voice. Hello. Before the conversation can continue any further, though, a bell echoes out from within the school building. Anyways, that's our cue. I'll be counting on you guys, okay? And I'll definitely save some burgers for you, ma'am. Let's go, Roro, before she gets here. All right. The two kids grab their backpacks and head inside, with only Thony waving back at you. Bye, guys. See ya, buds. Jenny continues to smile, though the vein on her forehead looks like it's about to explode with enough force to shatter her skull. So, was it just me or did this rower look like Toto? Yeah, he's... Suddenly, someone casually shoves their way in front of you, interrupting Fred. It takes you a moment to process what even happened, but before any anger at the sudden intruder's rudeness sets in, you recognize him. Hey guys! Long time no see. Uh-oh. Oh, hi dude. Fred looks at you with wide eyes, and instantly you recognize exactly what's going through his mind. It's been roughly a few months, but only a few people were actually able to recognize you as the Doberman that's been missing for a decade. You don't look the same at all anymore, sure, but how many Dobermen are there with boar tusks? Though to be fair, maybe people have recognized you already, but just don't care. But this makes no sense. Toto should know already, since he was the first one to recognize you with how much he had hit on you. How could he not recognize you? What, brings you here? Oh, I just came by to drop my little brother off at school. He ended up leaving pretty late this morning. Oops. His awkward chuckling only lasts for a moment before he finally picks up on the look on Fred's face. What's up, Fred? Don't tell me you've missed me that much. No, Toto, it's been a while, but, try not to freak out or anything, but there's someone that I'd like you to meet. Oh, did you finally find yourself a lover? No, it's... Fred motions towards you, and Toto finally turns around, looking you over. You stare at him with dread in your soul, expecting the flirtations to suddenly begin, but... No. It can't be. Is this a prank, Fred? No, it's him. Chad? Is that really you? He carefully approaches you, looking you over as tears well in his eyes. He reaches out as if he's going to touch you, but then stops short with a small sob escaping him. Hi? I'm sorry, is it okay if I... He holds his arms out, motioning for a hug, completely lost. You don't even think before making your response. Sure? He nods, then closes the gap between you, wrapping his arms around you, giving you a squeeze. I can't believe it. After 10 long years, you actually came back. Fred reaches out and gives him a sympathetic pat on the shoulder, and Jenny's murder frenzy settles somewhat, a gentle smile forming on her lips at this heartfelt reunion between friends after a decade apart. There, buddy. Just try to... I can't believe it. It's a miracle! Toto sniffles and sobs again, squeezing you even tighter as he rests his head atop your shoulder. Fred and Jenny watch the scene unfold, their hearts clearly warmed as empathy for Toto's emotions courses through them. You knew that this was going to happen. You knew that one day you would need to start explaining to people you once knew that you're back, whether you like it or not. It's impossible to disappear for a decade and just come back like nothing happened. But why? Toto lifts his head slightly, rubbing his cheek on yours as he sniffles. Then all the tension falls from his body, and ever so quietly... I kept my promise. Aren't I a good boy? As Toto whispers those words into your ear, an oppressive shiver creeps down your spine. To be continued. So he was just acting. Stretch. So we're getting more info on the Zomas, or more specifically on how Fred Zoma can develop, I guess. It is interesting to think that perhaps, or this is my thought, that perhaps Chad's Zoma can act as sort of like an extension of his body, but more so as like maybe if he develops it, he will be able to develop more body parts, like maybe another hand, feet, and maybe like a whole body, and that his Zoma can act as like full body armor. So that is interesting. I'm assuming that's where it's heading. I am curious to see what elemental affinity it has, though, because as far as I am aware, like Fred's is like what was it, Earth or like plant life or whatever. I'm not really sure what Mothix is, but Bruce is like obviously lightning. So I'm curious to see if Chad has any elemental affinity of his own, or if it's just like neutral. It's basic. So yeah. What else? I am curious to see Kathy and Thony's home life, though. Like, to see how they are doing. Like, very specifically how they themselves are doing. It's nice to see Toto again. I was wondering if he would ever show up, because I know Mati or Zordy doesn't like him. But I think he's kind of funny. He has potential to be funny, like comedic relief. So yeah, it's nice to see him show up again. He clearly knows that Chad, that Chad was already back. He clearly wasn't working at the mill or the lumber mill, whatever it was again, but he was back a while ago. It would be not, well, yeah. What else? Really, there isn't really much to talk about this. I'll probably keep that as one episode. It'll probably be a long episode, but interesting. I want to know if there's more hybrids. I mean, I know, like, does Fred have tusks, or is that just like one of those, like an overbite or underbite? Chad, of course, has boar tusks, and this Toto's brother has like a raccoon pattern on his face. So like I'm curious to see if there's more hybrids too, if they will ever show up. It is nice that some of the content was sort of seemed condensed. Like we didn't have to just sit through a whole bunch of days watching Chad train. That it literally just passed by like really fast. So that's good. Welcomed. Don't hurt me, Mati. This is good. This is a positive. I'm curious to see when Mothic is gonna get his clothes, because right here we see him wear a tank, but he's technically naked right now. So yeah. What else? I don't know. I can't really think of anything else. It's funny. Bruce is getting jealous that Mothic is so close to Chad. But I mean, it had to happen sometime. You couldn't keep him in the cabin or the forest your entire life. He eventually would have to go out. It's good that he's being able to talk in full complex sentences to Chad and most likely Fred. And that in general, that they're all making progress, that Fred is able to pass on some of his mana over to Chad. Fred is able to pass mana to Chad, and that Chad is able to be able to summon his fist without actually having to throw a punch. So hopefully that results in being able to summon more body parts, or maybe able to manipulate the fist, like cause it to grow in size and be like a Wreck-It Ralph type of fist. What else? I guess that's it. Like, if you have any ideas, write it down in the comments, and thank you all for watching / listening. If you would like to play Home Somewhere Else yourself, or get up to date to things going on with Home Somewhere Else, then you can do so by going down into the link in the description for their Twitter page, which should have a link to the HIO page where you can download the game and play it yourself. if Twitter implodes, then oh well. I'm pretty sure, that there's other links or there's other places that you can find Home Somewhere Else. Like, just go to itch.io yourself and, download it there. They do have a Patreon, so in case you would like to support the project and get early access to builds of Home Somewhere Else, as well as stories Somewhere Else, which is like, short stories for the characters and stuff, you can support them on Patreon and you get early access to that. And I guess that's it for now, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.